Alrighty, in this video we are going to tackle section 4.4. And in 4.4 we're looking at fractions and percents. So to change a fraction to a percent, we are going to have two steps. First, we are going to change the fraction to a decimal number. And then we are going to change the decimal number to a percent. So remember, to change from a fraction to a decimal, you're dividing the top number by the bottom number. And then to change a decimal to a percent, you're moving that decimal 2 spaces to the right and adding your percent sign. So for example, let's change 2 1/4 into a percent. So we have 2 whole and 1/4 more. So our whole goes in front of our decimal. And then behind the decimal, remember it's supposed to take the top and divide it by the bottom. So if we do 1 divided by 4, we're going to get 2.25. And you might remember that from 4 quarters and $1 is 25 cents for 1/4. But now that we have it in decimal form, 2.25 as a percent, let's move that decimal 2 spaces to the right to get 225%. Now, why don't you try 1.5 to a percent, doing the same thing. Pause the video while you do that, and then resume when you're ready to check your answer. So hopefully you got 150%. So 1 goes in front of the decimal, and then 1/2 is the same as 0.5. So when you move the decimal 2 spaces to the right, you had to add a 0 to get your 150 for your percent. So to change a percent to a fraction or to a mixed number, we are going to write the percent as a fraction with 100 as a denominator and delete the percent sign, because percent sign means out of 100. So we don't want to keep the percent sign and add the over 100, because then it's having it twice. And then the fraction that we've created, we need to reduce whenever possible. And we'll take a look at some examples on how to do that in a little bit. But first, let's look at some true-false statements. So fractions that have a common denominator other than, I should just say denominator, shouldn't it? Fractions that have a denominator other than 100 cannot be changed to a percent. That is not true. That is false, because we just looked at some examples where we had fractions that didn't have 100 as the bottom. We know we can just divide the top by the bottom. So let's say all fractions can be changed to a percent. The fraction 1/5 is equivalent to 1/5%. So we talked about just taking away the percent sign, and that does not work. But let's see what percent is equivalent to 1/5. So if we do 1 divided by 5 in the calculator, that'll give us 0.20, or 0.2 actually. It won't show us the 0, but we need to add it in when moving our decimal 2 spaces to the right. So 1/5 is equivalent to 20%. Then that's true. When changing from a percent to a mixed number, the fraction does not need to be reduced. We've mentioned a few times in class already that fractions always need to be reduced. And so that is false. And we can fix it. When changing percent to a mixed number, the fraction needs to be reduced. Always, always, always. So here's some practice. Change each fraction or mixed number to a percent. If necessary, round to the nearest tenth of a percent, so one decimal place, which neither one of these need to be, I believe. So, again, 3 divided by 4, move the decimal 2 spaces to the right, 5 3/10, 5 point, and then 3 divided by 10 to get that decimal, then move your decimal 2 spaces. And then here, change each percent to a fraction or a mixed number and reduce if possible. So put it over 100 and reduce it. But for 8, notice we have a decimal point. We're not allowed in the calculator to use a decimal in a fraction. So what we need to do is get rid of the decimal. We need to move that decimal point until we run out of numbers. So we need the top to be 125, not 12.5. So that means the decimal here at the bottom needs to be moved over as well. So instead of 100, we have to add a 0 and make it 1,000. So 125 over 1,000 is the unreduced fraction form of 12.5%. So go ahead and simplify that. Pause the video while you work on those and then check your work. Okay, here you go, 75%, 530%, 6/5 if you like to change it to mixed numbers, 1 1/5 or 1/8. If you want to change your improper fraction to a mixed number and you're not sure, let's refresh that for a second. The whole number is found by finding out how many times can the bottom number go in the top number. If we have 6 pieces and 5 pieces make up a whole, then 5 of those 6 is one whole. And so after we do that, how many pieces are left? Well, we took 5 away, so we have 1 left over. And that's why 6/5 is the same as 1 1/5. Let's get some more practice looking at some applications. Out of a possible total of 240 points on an exam, David received 204 points. What is the percent of the exam that David got? So let's set up as a fraction first, part to whole. So he received 204 points when there was a total of 240 points possible for the test. So then we need to divide, and we're going to divide the top 204 divided by the bottom 240. And when we do that, we get 0.85. And now that we have it in a decimal form, we can move that decimal 2 spaces to the right and add our percent sign. So David did very well with an 85%. Here, to receive a Bachelor of Science degree at Bluefield State College, the student must complete a total of 128 credit hours, of which 41 must be general education or core skill courses. So what percent of the total curriculum is dedicated to general education courses? So part to whole tells us that 41 out of the 128 credit hours are those core courses. So let's divide 41 divided by 128. that gives us this crazy decimal point, 3203125. So we're going to round, and let's take a look. Moving the decimal 2 spaces to the right gives us 32. So if we round to nearest tenth, the 3 tells us to stay the same, so it would be 32.0 or 32%. If we want to round it one more place and look at the 3, the 1 after it would tell us to stay the same. Or if we want to be a little bit more specific, 32.03%. It didn't tell us specifically where to round, so if you want to round 1 decimal place or 2 decimal places, that's fine. I would probably stick with an answer of 32%. So here's some food for thought. Try and justify why mixed numbers are larger percentages than proper fractions alone. So mixed number has a whole number and a fraction. Proper fractions are where the numerator, the top, is smaller than the denominator, the bottom. And it wants you to consider the fact that 100% is equal to what number? So pause and take a minute to jot down some thoughts and ideas, and then you can see what I have. So any mixed number must have a value greater than 1, because we have to have a whole number and a fraction. Otherwise, it's not a mixed number. And since 1 is equal to 100%, then the percentage of a mixed number has to be greater than 100%. Proper fractions are just a fraction of a whole, so they are always less than 1. So the percentage for a proper fraction has to be less than 100%. And then finally, see if you can remember the process or the steps involved in changing a percent to a fraction or a mixed number. So jot down your ideas. What do you think? So my idea was that since percent means out of 100, we write the percent as a fraction over 100, drop the percent sign, and reduce. Did you get all of that? If not, make sure that you fix your answer. Otherwise, those are the key concepts that you need to know for section 4.4. Good luck on the homework. Let me know if you need any help. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.